You wake to the same sound you've heard every morning for the past 15 years. It's not an alarm. Those are luxuries for the upper hives. Instead, it's the deep, rhythmic grinding of the processing machinery 12 levels below your hab block, a mechanical heartbeat that pulses through the ferrocrete walls and into your bones. The vibration is so constant, so persistent, that you've learned to sleep through it. But in those first moments of consciousness, before your mind builds its daily walls of denial, you can hear it clearly. Grind, grind, grind. The sound of something being broken down into its component parts. You sit up on your sleeping pallet, and the nutrient dispenser in your wall responds to your movement with a cheerful click. A portion of gray paste drops into the collection bowl, your daily ration, precisely measured to provide the minimum calories necessary for your continued productivity. The paste is warm, freshly processed, and it carries that familiar metallic aftertaste that you've never quite been able to identify. It's protein, they tell you, reconstituted organic compounds, synthetic nutrients designed to keep the workers of Hive Mortis healthy and functional. You've been eating it for 15 years, and you've never questioned its origin. The hab corridor outside your door is already alive with the shuffle of feet and the murmur of voices as your neighbors begin their daily routines. Mrs. Kelech from the adjoining unit is arguing with her teenage son again about his attendance at the youth indoctrination sessions. Old Grim, the former guardsman who lost his arm on some forgotten battlefield, is probably already dressed and ready, standing at his window watching the smog patterns shift between the hive spires. These are your people, your community, the small pocket of humanity that exists in the space between the grinding machinery below and the administrative levels above. You know their faces, their routines, their small joys and constant fears. You know that Mrs. Kelech hoards flavor enhancers from her work shift at the chemical plant. You know that Grim still talks to his dead squadmates in his sleep. You know that young Marco has been skipping work shifts to see a girl from level 47, and that the administratum will notice soon if he keeps it up. You know these people, and that knowledge will make what comes later so much worse. The morning commute to the processing facility is a 20-minute walk through maintenance corridors that smell of rust and recycled air. The walls here are older than the Imperium itself. Some say Dark Age technology pressed into service for the endless hunger of human survival. As you walk, you pass the newer workers, the ones who still ask questions about the process, who still wrinkle their noses at the smell that permeates everything 12 levels down. You remember being like them once, curious, concerned about efficiency reports and quality metrics, wondering why certain processing lines were restricted, why some doors required higher clearance levels, why the supervisors seemed to avoid certain sections entirely during their inspections. That curiosity dies quickly in this place. It has to. The processing floor stretches out before you like a cathedral of industry. Massive conveyor systems snake through the space, carrying tons of raw materials toward grinding stations the size of hab blocks. The noise here is overwhelming, not just the grinding you hear in your sleep, but the hiss of hydraulics, the clash of metal on metal, the constant churn of the sorting mechanisms that separate different grades of input material. Your station is processing Line 7, secondary protein reclamation. The official designation means nothing to you now, but you remember your first day when Supervisor Vince explained your duties with bureaucratic precision. You sort incoming material by consistency and composition. Soft organic matter goes to grinding station alpha. Harder materials require pre-processing in the molecular dissolvers. Anything with synthetic components gets flagged for special handling. Simple work, mindless work. Work that doesn't require you to think about what you're actually sorting. The first load of the day arrives on the conveyor with a wet thump that you've learned to ignore. Chunks of pale, soft matter mixed with tougher, more fibrous material. There are liquids involved, pools of dark red that drain through grading systems into collection tanks below. The smell is organic, primal, somehow familiar in a way that makes your hindbrain whisper warnings you've trained yourself not to hear. You work with practiced efficiency, using your sorting stick to push different materials toward their designated chutes. Soft matter to alpha, dense matter to pre-processing. Anything unusual gets flagged for supervisor review. But today, something stops you. Caught in a tangle of fibrous material near the end of the conveyor, there's something small and metallic. At first glance, it looks like debris, the kind of industrial waste that sometimes contaminates the input streams. But as you lean closer, your breath catches in your throat. It's a ring, a simple band of tarnished metal with a small synthetic gemstone. The kind of cheap jewelry that hab workers save months to afford, usually bought for marriages or coming-of-age ceremonies. The kind of ring that Mrs. Kelach wears on her left hand, though hers has a blue stone instead of this faded green one. The kind of ring that someone was wearing when they died. Your sorting stick hovers over the conveyor, trembling slightly. Around you, the machinery continues its endless grinding, processing tons of material every hour to feed the billions of souls in Hive Mortis. Your fellow workers maintain their steady rhythm, pushing materials toward their designated fates with the mechanical precision of people who have learned not to see what they're actually handling. But you see the ring. And for the first time in 15 years, you begin to understand what you've been processing. The realization doesn't come all at once. It seeps into your consciousness like water through concrete, slow and inexorable and ultimately destructive. You flag the ring for supervisor review and continue with your shift, but your mind won't let go of what you've seen. As the day progresses, you begin to notice other things you've trained yourself to ignore. The texture variations in the soft matter. The way some of the fibrous material seems to have a familiar structure, almost like, no, don't think about it. The occasional piece of fabric caught in the grinding mechanisms. Scraps of clothing in colors and patterns you recognize from the lower hab levels, from your own neighborhood. Stop. Focus on the work. The way the red liquid has a specific smell, coppery and warm, that reminds you of the medical facility where you donated blood last month to meet your civic contribution quota. The quota. The monthly quota that every citizen must meet. Blood donation or alternative contributions. The way the processing facility operates on a schedule that seems to correlate with the disappearances. The way certain hab blocks empty out after arbitrator visits. The way families receive notification that their loved ones have been reassigned to essential services elsewhere in the hive. The way the nutrient paste in your hab unit sometimes has different textures, different flavors. Your shift ends and you walk home through the same corridors you've traveled for 15 years. But everything looks different now. The maintenance signs that read nutritional supply infrastructure take on new meaning. The restricted access doors marked authorized personnel only seem more ominous. The cheerful efficiency posters showing happy workers contributing to the Great Reclamation Project make your stomach turn. In your hab unit, the nutrient dispenser provides your evening meal with its familiar click. The gray paste sits in its bowl, warm and ready for consumption. You stare at it for a long time, remembering the ring you found this morning, thinking about Mrs. Kelach and old Grim and young Marco, thinking about the quotas, thinking about the disappearances, thinking about the taste. You realize, with a clarity that cuts through years of willful ignorance, that you've been eating your neighbors, you've been processing your friends, you've been participating in a system that treats human life as nothing more than raw material for the endless hunger of the hive. And tomorrow, you'll go back to work. Because in the Imperium of Man, even the most horrible truth is preferable to starvation. Even the most monstrous system is better than chaos. Even cannibalism is justified when the alternative is death. The grinding sound continues through the night, processing the day's harvest into tomorrow's meal, and you lie awake listening to it, knowing that somewhere in that mechanical symphony, someone you knew is being transformed into something you'll eat. Grind, grind, grind. The sound of survival in the 41st millennium. The mathematics of starvation are brutally simple, and they govern every aspect of life in Hive Mortis. 200 billion human beings packed into a vertical city that stretches from the planet's surface to the upper atmosphere. each one requiring a minimum of 1,200 calories per day to maintain basic functionality. The numbers are staggering, incomprehensible, and absolutely unforgiving. 240 trillion calories, every single day. You discover these statistics 3 days after finding the ring, buried in a production efficiency report that someone left on the supervisor's desk. The document is marked with the double-headed eagle of the administratum, stamped with authenticity seals, and written in the dry, clinical language of bureaucratic necessity. It reads like an engineering manual, not a death warrant for humanity. Current agricultural output from Agri-Levels 1523 provides approximately 12% of required caloric intake for Hive Mortis' primary population. Imported foodstuffs from off-world sources contribute an additional 8%. Synthetic nutrient production accounts for 15% of daily requirements. The remaining 65% of nutritional needs are met through the Biological Reclamation Program, as authorized under Imperial Decree 7751 Omega. 65%, nearly 2/3 of everything consumed in this hive, comes from the Biological Reclamation Program. The euphemistic name that appears on official documents, spoken in the sterile language of administrative efficiency. But you know what it really means now. You've seen it processed through the grinding stations. You've sorted it by hand. The remaining 65% is people. The report continues with the cold precision of an accountant documenting inventory. Grade A biological sources, designated livestock, and approved organic materials constitute 15% of reclamation input. Grade B sources, executed criminals, and penal colony transfers provide 25%. Grade C sources, natural deaths, and medical facility disposals contribute 20%. Grade D sources, administrative reassignments and quota fulfillments, complete the remaining 40%. Grade D sources, administrative reassignments, quota fulfillments. The people who disappear in the night, the neighbors who receive reassignment notices, the families who are told their loved ones have been transferred to essential services in distant sectors of the hive. You think about Marcus Volgen, the hab worker from level 43 who accumulated gambling debts with the wrong people. His wife received notification last week that he'd been reassigned to critical infrastructure maintenance in Sector 7. She was grateful, she said. The new position came with increased rations for the family and priority medical access for their daughter's chronic lung condition. Marcus hasn't been seen since the arbitrators took him for processing and reassignment briefing. But his family is eating better than they have in months. The report includes a detailed breakdown of processing efficiency. Current facility operations maintain 97.3% material utilization with minimal waste. Advanced molecular dissolution techniques ensure complete protein extraction, while synthetic binding agents maintain nutritional consistency across all output products. Quality control measures guarantee consumer safety and satisfaction ratings remain within acceptable parameters. Consumer satisfaction. They measure how much people enjoy eating their processed neighbors. You begin to understand the true genius of the system as you read further. It's not just about solving the starvation problem. It's about creating a closed-loop economy where every human being serves a dual purpose. Living citizens contribute labor and productivity. Dead citizens contribute nutritional value. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is without purpose. Even the emotional trauma of the system is carefully managed. Families receive compensation packages when their loved ones are reassigned. Enhanced rations, medical priority, housing improvements. The system ensures that losing someone actually improves your quality of life, creating perverse incentives that make people complicit in their own degradation. The upper levels of the hive operate on an entirely different economic model. Lord Governor Hectrix and his administrative council dine on genuine livestock imported from agricultural worlds. Their banquet halls serve real meat, synthesized wines, luxury foods that haven't seen the inside of a processing plant. They know exactly what they're not eating, and that knowledge is part of the privilege. But even among the elite, there are gradations of horror. The mid-level administrators and sector supervisors are served artisanal protein products, essentially the same processed human material as the workers, but prepared with enhanced flavoring and presented as a delicacy. They're told it's a special blend of premium biological sources, and they believe it because the alternative is unthinkable. The arbitrators who enforce the quotas eat standard rations like everyone else. They know what they're consuming, but they've been psychologically conditioned to view it as a necessary duty. They're the guardians of survival, the hard men making hard choices so that humanity can continue to exist. Their training manuals explicitly state that traditional moral frameworks are luxuries the Imperium cannot afford. You find a copy of these training materials in the facility's administrative archives, hidden behind productivity reports and maintenance schedules. The document is titled Psychological Preparation for Essential Services Personnel, and it reads like a manual for manufacturing monsters. The recruit must understand that conventional moral frameworks represent pre-imperial thinking, unsuitable for the realities of 41st millennium survival. What previous generations might have considered abhorrent, we recognize as necessary. The Emperor's wisdom manifests in the courage to make decisions that ensure humanity's continuation, regardless of personal comfort or outdated ethical constraints. They have entire psychological frameworks for justifying cannibalism, training programs that teach people how to process human beings while maintaining their sanity, performance evaluation metrics that measure how efficiently someone can butcher their neighbors. And it works. The system functions with terrifying effectiveness because it's built on the fundamental truth of human nature. We will accept almost anything to survive. We will rationalize the unthinkable, normalize the monstrous, participate in our own degradation, as long as the alternative is death. The report includes efficiency projections for the next fiscal year. Population growth is expected to increase demand by 3–2%, while traditional food sources will likely decrease due to off-world supply disruptions. The shortfall will be made up through expanded quota implementation and enhanced biological resource utilization. More people will disappear. More families will receive reassignment notifications. More neighbors will vanish into the grinding stations to feed the endless hunger of the hive. But buried in the appendices, you find something that makes your blood freeze. A cross-reference chart showing correlation between processing facility locations and residential sectors. The facilities aren't randomly distributed throughout the hive. They're strategically placed to serve specific population zones. Your facility, Processing Plant 7G, primarily serves residential sectors 12 through 18. Your neighborhood, your hab block, your friends and family. You've been eating the people you know, the people you love, the people whose children play in the same corridors where you played as a child. Mrs. Kelech's missing brother, Old Grimm's daughter who transferred to administrative services last year, young Marco's girlfriend who supposedly accepted a position in the upper hive. They're all here, in the processed paste, in the nutrient dispensers, in the evening meals that families share while telling stories and laughing together, unknowingly consuming the people they're mourning. The final section of the report contains a philosophical justification that reads like scripture. The Great Reclamation represents the ultimate expression of imperial unity. In death, the citizen continues to serve the emperor by nourishing their fellow citizens. The boundary between self and community dissolves, creating a true communion of imperial purpose. We are all one flesh, one blood, one destiny. What greater love can be shown than to give one's life so that others may live? They've turned cannibalism into a religious experience, made consumption into communion, transformed the ultimate violation of human dignity into an act of imperial devotion. And tomorrow morning, you'll return to Processing Line 7, Secondary Protein Reclamation. You'll sort the materials with practiced efficiency. You'll push soft matter toward grinding station alpha and flag unusual items for supervisor review, because the alternative is joining the process materials yourself, because questioning the system means becoming part of it, because in the grim darkness of the far future, even the most horrific truth is preferable to the chaos of starvation. The grinding continues through the night, processing today's quota into tomorrow's sustenance. And you lie awake calculating the mathematics of survival, understanding finally that in the Imperium of Man, every meal is a communion with the dead. 200 billion souls, 240 trillion calories, 65% biological reclamation. The numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole truth either. The selection process begins with data. Cold, clinical information flowing through administrative networks like blood through arteries, carrying the essential nutrients of bureaucratic function. In the vast data processing centers of the upper hive, cogitator arrays analyze productivity metrics, behavioral assessments, genetic profiles, and social compliance ratings for every citizen in Hive Mortis. 200 billion individual data profiles, each one reduced to a series of numbers that determine your value to the Imperium and your likelihood of survival. You discover this 3 weeks after the Ring incident, when a corrupted data slate makes its way to the processing facility. Someone in the administratum made an error, routing a selection manifest to your workplace instead of the arbitrator station. The document appears on Supervisor Vince's desk among the daily production reports, marked with authorization codes that your security clearance shouldn't allow you to see. But administrative errors are common in systems this vast, and curiosity, once awakened, is difficult to suppress. The document is titled Monthly Biological Resource Allocation Sector 12 Processing Quota. It contains 847 names, organized by residential block and efficiency rating. Each entry includes a citizen identification number, current productivity metrics, family status, and something called a reclamation priority index. Marcus Volgen is on the list. RPI 847, priority classification, immediate. Mrs. Kelech's son, the one who's been skipping indoctrination sessions. RPI 623. Priority classification, next cycle. Your name isn't there. Not yet. But seeing the systematic nature of the selection process, understanding the criteria that determine who lives and who becomes protein paste, you realize that it's only a matter of time. The arbitrators who enforce these quotas operate from reinforced stations throughout the residential sectors. They wear the black uniforms of Imperial law enforcement, carry shock mauls and restraint equipment, and speak in the clipped, professional tones of people who have learned to disconnect emotional response from necessary action. Arbitrator Sergeant Kine has been working Sector 12 for 8 years. You see him sometimes during shift changes, reviewing data slates while his subordinates check residential compliance. He's a thin man with prematurely gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggest he understands exactly what his job entails. The quotas aren't arbitrary, he explains to new arbitrators during training sessions that you overhear through thin hab walls. They're calculated based on nutritional requirements, processing capacity, and population sustainability. We're not murderers, we're resource managers. Every person we select for biological reclamation feeds approximately 12 citizens for 1 week. The mathematics are simple. 1 death prevents 12 deaths from starvation. The training continues with clinical precision. New recruits learn to identify selection criteria that prioritize efficiency over sentiment, chronic illness that reduces productivity, criminal behavior that threatens social stability, genetic markers that indicate potential for mutation or psychological instability, family structures that consume resources without contributing proportional value. The system creates its own justifications. People selected for processing aren't victims. They're voluntary contributors to Imperial survival. Their families receive compensation packages that often exceed their lifetime earning potential. Children of processed citizens receive educational opportunities and enhanced rations. The system turns tragedy into opportunity, loss into gain. But the quotas demand expansion. What begins as selecting criminals and dissidents evolves into targeting the unemployed, the elderly, the chronically ill. When those populations prove insufficient, the criteria broaden further. Gambling debts become indicators of poor judgment and resource management. Missing work shifts suggests lack of imperial dedication. Questioning official policies demonstrates potential sedition. Marcus Volgen's gambling problem started small. A few thrones wagered on underground fighting matches, casual bets with hab-block neighbors over productivity competitions. But debt has its own mathematics, growing exponentially until the amounts become impossible to repay through legitimate labor. When the debt collectors come calling, they offer alternatives to financial settlement. Community service programs, voluntary participation in resource allocation initiatives, opportunities to clear your obligations while contributing to imperial necessity. Marcus thinks he's volunteering for maintenance work in the lower hive. Dangerous but well-paid labor that will clear his debts and provide his family with security. The contract he signs is comprehensive, covering health benefits and family compensation in case of workplace accidents. He reads through the dense legal language, understanding perhaps half of the technical terms, trusting that the administratum has his best interests in mind. The transport vehicle that takes him to his new assignment is unmarked, its destination unlisted in any public records. His wife receives notification that he's begun essential infrastructure work in a classified location, and that communication will be restricted for security reasons. The enhanced rations for his family begin arriving the next day, along with priority medical access for their daughter's treatment. Marcus never sees his family again, but from their perspective, his sacrifice has given them a better life. The psychological conditioning required for this system extends beyond the arbitrators to the families themselves. Grief counselors provide support for citizens whose loved ones are reassigned, helping them understand that their loss serves a greater purpose. These counselors are trained in therapeutic techniques that transform mourning into gratitude, despair into pride. Your husband's contribution represents the highest form of imperial service, Counselor Vex explains to Marcus's wife during their third session. He chose to provide for his family through ultimate sacrifice. The protein supplements your daughter receives, the enhanced medical care, the improved housing allocation. These are expressions of his continuing love, made possible through his voluntary participation in the biological reclamation program. The language is carefully crafted to avoid explicit acknowledgement while making the truth undeniable. Everyone knows what biological reclamation means, but the euphemistic framework allows for psychological distance. Families can maintain the fiction that their loved ones are serving the emperor in distant locations while simultaneously benefiting from their actual fate. Children born into this system display the most disturbing adaptations. They accept the disappearances as natural phenomena, like weather patterns or seasonal changes. 10-year-old Sarah Kelech talks casually about how her uncle got selected for special service, and how excited she is that her family now qualifies for premium nutritional supplements. Mom says Uncle Thorne is helping feed hungry people now, Sarah explains with the innocent enthusiasm of childhood. She says when I'm older, I might get selected too, if I'm really good and work really hard. I hope I get picked, because then our whole family would get the better food forever and ever. The children don't understand the full implications, but they've internalized the system's values. Being selected isn't punishment, it's honor. Families compete for selection opportunities. Citizens view their processing quotas as chance for advancement, not death sentences. The most chilling aspect of the selection process is its bureaucratic normality. Arbitrators review files over morning recaf, discussing human beings like inventory items. Processing facility supervisors optimize workflow efficiency while scheduling family members for sequential processing. Administrative clerks calculate compensation packages with the same attention to detail they'd use for supply requisitions. You watch this system operate with growing horror, understanding that you're not just witnessing it, you're participating in it. Every day you work the processing line, sorting human remains with mechanical precision. Every evening you consume your nutrient rations, knowing their true source. Every month you receive your productivity evaluations, understanding that poor performance might result in your own selection. The system doesn't require malice to function. It only requires acceptance. And in a universe where the alternative to participation is starvation, acceptance comes easily. Standing in your HAB unit, looking at the selection manifest with Marcus's name highlighted for immediate processing, you realize that you face the same choice as every other citizen of the Imperium. You can resist the system and risk selection yourself. You can report the manifest and demonstrate loyalty that might improve your survival chances. Or you can continue participating, processing your neighbors and consuming the results, hoping that compliance will protect you from becoming the processed. In the grim darkness of the far future, even moral choices are luxuries that most cannot afford. The grinding continues through the night, processing today's selections into tomorrow's sustenance. And you lie awake calculating your own survival odds, understanding finally that in the Imperium of Man, everyone is both hunter and prey in the great biological reclamation. Marcus Vol'jin, RPI 847, priority classification, immediate. Your name isn't on the list, yet. The transport tube arrives at Processing Center 7G with the mechanical precision of a chrono measurement, its cargo doors hissing open to reveal the day's biological resources. From your position at Sorting Station Alpha 7, you have a clear view of the arrival platform, where the new materials are unloaded for initial categorization. You recognize Marcus Vol'jin immediately. He's unconscious but breathing, secured to a transportation gurney along with 19 other citizens who have been selected for processing. The stunning compounds used during collection are designed to minimize trauma and maintain material quality, a pharmaceutical mercy that renders the victims unaware of their transition from citizen to resource. Marcus looks peaceful, almost serene. The deep lines of worry that had marked his face during the past months, the stress of debt, the fear of collectors, the desperate search for solutions, have been smoothed away by the neural suppressants. He appears younger, healthier, ready for the efficient transformation that awaits him. You want to look away, but your duties require continued observation. As a processing technician grade 2, you're responsible for initial categorization and quality assessment. Each biological resource must be evaluated for processing suitability, optimal utilization pathways, and potential contamination risks. Marcus receives classification B7, adult male, adequate nutritional condition, standard processing protocols. His gurney is tagged with a yellow identification marker and moved toward pre-processing station 3, where initial preparation will begin within the next 4 hours. The processing facility operates with the sterile efficiency of a medical center, its corridors lined with gleaming metal surfaces and atmospheric recycling systems that maintain optimal temperature and humidity conditions. The staff wear clean white uniforms marked with departmental identifications, their movements coordinated by shift schedules designed to maximize productivity while minimizing psychological stress. Dr. Vorth, the chief processing supervisor, conducts morning briefings with the clinical detachment of a university lecturer. She's a thin woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of precise movements that suggest surgical training. Her voice carries the authority of someone who spent decades perfecting the most efficient methods for converting human beings into nutritional resources. Today's biological yield includes 20 standard classification adults and 3 pediatric units, she announces to the assembled technicians. Processing priorities focus on maximizing protein extraction while maintaining quality consistency across all output products. Remember, we're not just producing nutrition, we're providing hope to the billions of citizens who depend on our work. The pediatric units are processed separately, their smaller size requiring specialized equipment but yielding proportionally higher quality protein concentrates. The technicians who handle juvenile processing receive additional psychological conditioning and enhanced medical benefits, recognition of the emotional challenges inherent in their specialized duties. Marcus's journey through the facility follows established protocols designed to minimize waste while maximizing nutritional yield. Pre-processing Station 3 handles initial preparation, medical evaluation, contamination screening, and optimization assessment. His unconscious form is subjected to detailed scanning that reveals bone density, muscle mass distribution, organ condition, and potential processing complications. The scanner results appear on monitoring screens throughout the facility. Subject B7, optimal processing candidate, projected yield 73, 4 kilograms usable biomass, quality rating standard plus, estimated nutritional output 2,847 individual meal portions, nearly 3,000 meals. Marcus Volgen, hab worker and father, will feed almost 3,000 of his fellow citizens. His gambling debts and family worries will be transformed into the sustenance that keeps children healthy, workers productive, and the great machine of imperial survival functioning for another day. The actual processing begins at Station 7, where specialized technicians operate equipment designed by the finest minds of the Mechanicus. The machinery represents millennia of refinement, each component optimized for maximum efficiency and minimum waste. The process itself is surprisingly quick, less than 30 minutes from biological input to packaged nutritional output. Technician Morrow has been operating Processing Station 7 for 12 years. He's a methodical man with steady hands and the kind of emotional detachment that allows him to excel at work that would destroy most people's sanity. During his lunch break, he sits in the facility cafeteria eating the same processed nutrients produced by his station, discussing productivity metrics with his colleagues while consuming the results of their morning's work. The new molecular dissolution systems are incredible, Morrow explains between bites of gray paste that might have been Marcus Volgen an hour earlier. We're getting 97% biomass utilization now, compared to only 85% with the old equipment. The Mechanicus really outdid themselves with the latest upgrades. His colleague, Technician Hale, nods approvingly while reviewing efficiency reports on her data slate. The quality consistency improvements are even more impressive. We're maintaining nutritional standardization across all output batches, regardless of input material variation. The citizens can't taste the difference between a healthy adult male and a chronically ill elderly female once processing is complete. Quality Control Inspector Graves conducts regular assessments of the facility's output, testing samples for nutritional content, contamination markers, and taste consistency. His laboratory is equipped with the most sophisticated analysis equipment available, capable of detecting molecular-level variations that might affect consumer satisfaction or health outcomes. Sample B7 alpha shows excellent protein density with optimal amino acid distribution, Inspector Graves records in his daily report. Texture analysis indicates superior processing quality with minimal fibrous content. Taste evaluation registers neutral positive, suitable for standard distribution without additional flavor enhancement requirements. The packaging systems that prepare processed nutrients for distribution operate with automated precision, each container sealed and labeled according to strict quality standards. The labels display nutritional information, consumption guidelines, and imperial purity certifications, but no indication of the material's actual origin. Marcus Volgen's transformation yields 847 individual nutrition packages, each one containing approximately 285 grams of processed protein paste. The packages are loaded onto distribution vehicles that will carry them throughout residential sectors 1218, where they'll be dispensed through HAB unit nutrient systems to families who have no knowledge of their true source. The efficiency reports generated by Marcus's processing are exemplary. Total biological utilization 97.3%. Processing time 27 minutes 34 seconds. Quality rating standard plus. Contamination markers negative. Consumer safety assessment approved for immediate distribution. But buried in the technical data, there are human details that the machinery cannot process. The wedding ring that Marcus wore, now cleaned and cataloged as metallic debris, Category 3, suitable for recycling. The small scar on his left hand from a childhood accident, reduced to tissue irregularity, minimal impact on processing efficiency. The tattoo of his daughter's name on his shoulder, classified as cosmetic alteration, no effect on nutritional value. These remnants of Marcus's humanity are disposed of according to standard protocols. Personal effects are incinerated unless they have recycling value. Dental work and surgical implants are extracted for material recovery. Anything that cannot be converted to nutritional purposes is processed through waste management systems that leave no trace of individual identity. Dr. Vorth conducts her evening evaluation with the same clinical precision that marked her morning briefing. Today's processing operations exceeded efficiency targets by 32%, with quality ratings consistently above standard requirements. Total biological yield, 1,847 kilograms usable biomass. Projected nutritional output, 47,386 individual meal portions. Zero contamination incidents, minimal equipment maintenance requirements. The numbers are impressive, representing the successful conversion of 23 human beings into nearly 50,000 meals. But Dr. Vorth's attention focuses on optimization opportunities rather than the human cost of these achievements. Tomorrow's processing schedule includes 37 biological resources, including several pediatric units that will require specialized handling. I want all technicians to review juvenile processing protocols before their shifts begin. Remember, these specialized procedures demand additional precision, but they yield proportionally higher nutritional value. The families depending on our work deserve nothing less than our absolute best. The facility operates 24 hours per day, its multiple shifts ensuring continuous processing of biological resources into nutritional products. Night shift workers like Technician Brand handle the overflow from daytime operations, processing citizens who are selected during evening quota collections. The night shift has a different rhythm, Brand explains during a rare break in processing operations. Less supervision, more personal responsibility. You develop your own efficiency methods, find ways to optimize the process that the day's supervisors might not appreciate. It's quieter work, more contemplative. You have time to think about the larger purpose of what we're doing. Brand has processed over 3,000 biological resources during his 4 years on night shift, each one contributing to the vast nutritional network that sustains Hive Mortis. He maintains detailed personal records of his processing achievements, tracking efficiency improvements and quality metrics with the pride of a craftsman perfecting his art. The grinding continues through the night, processing today's biological resources into tomorrow's sustenance. And in the sterile efficiency of Processing Center 7G, human beings become nutrition with mechanical precision, their individual stories lost in the greater narrative of imperial survival. Marcus Volgen's journey ends where it began, in the HAB blocks of Sector 12, dispensed through nutrient systems to families who consume him without knowledge or recognition. His wife and daughter receive their enhanced rations, grateful for the improved nutrition that Marcus's sacrifice has provided, unaware that they're consuming the man they mourn. Processing Station 7. Subject B7. Yield, 847 packages, quality, standard plus. The machinery operates with perfect efficiency. The human cost is simply data. The morning meal ritual in Hab Block 7 Delta begins like every other day in the past decade. Mrs. Kelech activates her family's nutrient dispenser with the practiced efficiency of someone who's performed this action thousands of times, watching the familiar gray paste emerge from the wall-mounted unit with the metallic click that signals the beginning of another day in service to the Emperor. Her daughter Sarah, now 11 years old, waits patiently at the small table that serves as their family's dining area. The child has grown accustomed to the enhanced rations that began arriving after her uncle's selection for special service, and she's developed a preference for the morning portions that seem to have a richer, more satisfying texture than the standard evening meals. What Sarah doesn't know, what she can never be allowed to know, is that the morning portions come from Processing Center 7G's premium output lines. The biological resources processed during night shifts when quality control standards are highest and nutritional extraction reaches maximum efficiency. What Sarah doesn't know is that she's eating her Uncle Thorn. The enhanced rations program that benefits families of processed citizens represents one of the Imperium's most elegant solutions to potential social unrest. Rather than allowing grief to ferment into anger or resistance, the system transforms loss into gain, tragedy into opportunity. Families receive tangible improvements to their quality of life that make questioning the system psychologically difficult. Mrs. Kelech has noticed the improvements immediately. The gray paste has better consistency, a more pleasant aftertaste, and seems to provide more sustained energy throughout her work shifts at the chemical processing plant. Her daughter's chronic respiratory condition has improved significantly since the enhanced rations began, the additional nutritional content apparently strengthening Sarah's immune system and overall health. Uncle Thorn is still taking care of us, Mrs. Kelech explains to Sarah during their morning meal, unaware of the literal truth of her statement. Even though he's serving the Emperor in a distant place, his sacrifice ensures that we have everything we need. That's what family means in the Imperium. We take care of each other, even when we can't be together. The distribution network that carries processed nutrients throughout Hive Mortis operates with the efficiency of a circulatory system, moving sustenance from processing centers to residential sectors through a vast infrastructure of transport tubes and automated dispensing systems. The gray paste that families consume each day represents the collective sacrifice of their neighbors, friends, and loved ones, transformed through industrial precision into the calories necessary for survival. But the distribution system maintains careful separation between source and consumption. Citizens never consume biological resources processed from their immediate family members or closest neighbors. The Administratum's psychological research indicates that such proximity could trigger recognition responses that might compromise social stability. Instead, the processed remains of Sector 12 citizens are distributed to Sectors 15-18, while Sector 12 receives nutritional products derived from citizens of Sectors 8-11. This geographic separation creates psychological distance that allows consumption to continue without triggering traumatic recognition, while still maintaining the efficient utilization of all biological resources. Marcus Volgen's processed remains, for example, are distributed primarily to Hab Blocks 15 Charlie and 16 Delta, where his transformation into nutrition paste feeds families who never knew his name or face. His sacrifice becomes their sustenance, his death their continued survival, his individual identity dissolved into the anonymous gray paste that represents life itself for billions of Imperial citizens. The Calix family in Hab Block 15 Charlie receives their morning rations with gratitude that borders on reverence. Father Jorik works double shifts at the atmospheric recycling plant, while Mother Enam maintains their Hab unit and cares for their 3 young children. The enhanced portions they've been receiving since Elder Calix's reassignment to essential services, have transformed their families' prospects. The children are growing stronger every day. Anna observes while watching her youngest daughter consume her morning portion with obvious satisfaction. Little Myra's appetite has improved so much since we started receiving the premium nutritional supplements. I think the higher protein content is exactly what growing children need. The protein content comes from Marcus Volgen's muscle tissue, processed through molecular dissolution and reconstituted into digestible paste. Little Myra is literally growing stronger by consuming the man who worried about his gambling debts and worked double shifts to provide for his own daughter's medical treatments. The irony is lost on everyone involved because the system is designed to obscure these connections. Families consume processed citizens while mourning their lost loved ones, never understanding that their grief and their sustenance spring from the same source. Elder administrative officials who design and oversee this system operate under different nutritional protocols entirely. Lord Governor Hectrix maintains private agricultural facilities that provide genuine livestock products for the upper hive's consumption. His banquet halls serve real meat from animals that lived and died as nature intended, prepared by chefs who have never seen the inside of a processing facility. The middle-tier administrators, sector supervisors, facility managers, department coordinators consume artisanal nutrition products that are essentially the same processed human material as the general population, but enhanced with flavor additives and presented as premium foodstuffs. They're told these products represent the finest biological resources available, selected for superior nutritional content and taste characteristics. Supervisor Mortian of the Cultural Indoctrination Department regularly hosts dinner parties where he serves what he believes are exotic protein preparations imported from distant agri-worlds. His guests compliment the complex flavors and sophisticated preparation, unaware that they're consuming processed dissidents and political prisoners with added synthetic seasonings. The recent shipments from the Cadian processing facilities have been exceptional. Supervisor Mortian explains to his dinner guests while serving portions that were once arbitrator Calyx, who questioned quota enforcement protocols too persistently. The rigorous training regimens these subjects underwent before processing has resulted in remarkably lean, high-quality protein with excellent texture characteristics. The most disturbing aspect of the consumption system reveals itself in the recognition moments, rare instances when some detail survives processing and triggers awareness in a consumer. These incidents are carefully documented by the administratum as potential security risks requiring immediate containment. Technician Hale experienced such a moment during her evening meal 6 months ago, when she discovered a partially dissolved identification tag mixed in with her nutrition paste. The tag bore the name and citizen number of her former neighbor, an elderly man who'd volunteered for essential medical research, according to the official notification. The psychological trauma of this recognition required immediate intervention. Counselor Vex provided emergency therapeutic treatment designed to help Technician Hale process the experience in a way that wouldn't compromise her continued functionality or loyalty to the system. What you've discovered represents the beautiful truth of imperial unity, Counselor Vex explained during their intensive therapy sessions. Your neighbor continues to serve the Emperor by providing sustenance to faithful citizens like yourself. His transformation represents the ultimate expression of community solidarity, giving his life so that others may live. You should feel honored to participate in this sacred communion. The therapeutic framework transforms recognition from trauma into reverence, horror into gratitude. Technician Hale now speaks of her experience as a spiritual awakening rather than a psychological violation, describing how consuming her neighbor helped her understand the true meaning of imperial citizenship. The children born into this system represent the future of normalized cannibalism. Young Sarah Kellach and her generation accept the nutritional distribution system as natural law, no different from atmospheric recycling or gravitational force. They've never known a world where people don't disappear for essential service, where families don't receive enhanced rations after losing loved ones, where the gray paste doesn't represent the transformed substance of human sacrifice. These children play games that reflect their understanding of the system. Processing plant is a popular recreational activity where children take turns being biological resources and facility technicians, acting out the transformation process with the casual enthusiasm of youth. They compete to see who can achieve the highest processing efficiency ratings and celebrate successful nutritional output achievements. I want to work in a real processing facility when I grow up, 10-year-old Marco Vex announces during a school career planning session. My dad says it's the most important work in the Imperium, turning citizens into food so everyone can stay healthy. I want to help feed people too. The educational curricula in lower Hive schools include detailed instruction about the biological reclamation system, presented as a triumph of imperial engineering and social organization. Children learn about protein extraction techniques, nutritional optimization protocols, and the mathematical calculations that ensure adequate caloric distribution throughout the population. They study the system the way previous generations might have studied agriculture or manufacturing, as an essential industry that makes civilization possible. The moral implications simply don't exist for them, because they've never been exposed to alternative ethical frameworks that might challenge the system's legitimacy. The grinding continues through the night, processing today's biological resources into tomorrow's sustenance. And throughout Hive Mortis, families gather around their dining tables to consume the transformed remains of their fellow citizens, participating unknowingly in a communion that connects every meal to someone's death, every portion to someone's sacrifice. Mrs. Kelech finishes her morning meal and prepares for another day at the chemical processing plant, nourished by her brother's sacrifice and grateful for the enhanced nutrition that his essential service provides. Sarah leaves for her educational sessions, growing stronger each day on the processed remains of Uncle Thorn, learning about the glorious efficiency of imperial resource management systems. The cycle continues with mechanical precision, consumption leading to processing, processing enabling consumption, each generation accepting slightly more horror as natural law until cannibalism becomes as mundane as breathing. Enhanced rations, premium nutritional supplements, sacred communion, the words change. The truth remains the same. The human mind possesses remarkable capacity for adaptation, especially when survival depends upon accepting the unacceptable. In Hive Mortis, this psychological flexibility has evolved into a sophisticated system of mental defense mechanisms that allow billions of citizens to participate in institutionalized cannibalism while maintaining their sanity, their social bonds, and their sense of moral purpose. Dr. Yellen's research into adaptive ethical frameworks in high-stress population centers provides disturbing insights into how normal people learn to accept horror as routine. Her clinical observations, conducted over 15 years in the lower Hive sectors, document the psychological stages that transform ordinary citizens into willing participants in their own degradation. The initial exposure typically produces predictable stress responses, Dr. Yellen notes in her confidential report to the Administratum's Department of Social Stability. Subjects experience denial, revulsion, and resistance when first confronted with evidence of the biological reclamation system. However, sustained exposure combined with survival necessity produces remarkable psychological adaptation within 6 to 18 months. The adaptation process begins with rationalization. Citizens develop elaborate justification systems that allow them to participate in the consumption system while maintaining psychological distance from its implications. These justifications often focus on the utilitarian mathematics of survival, one death preventing multiple deaths from starvation, the greater good of imperial continuity, the sacred duty of serving the emperor through ultimate sacrifice. Jorik Kalex, the atmospheric recycling technician whose father was processed 6 months ago, demonstrates typical adaptation patterns. Initially traumatized by his father's selection for essential services, Jorik gradually developed a framework that transforms his grief into pride, his loss into purpose. My father always said that a man's worth is measured by his service to the emperor, Jorik explains during his monthly psychological evaluation. When he was selected for biological reclamation, I realized that he'd been chosen for the highest form of service possible. He's not dead, he's transformed. He continues to serve by nourishing the faithful, by keeping imperial citizens strong and productive. Every day that I eat my rations, I'm communing with his sacrifice. The psychological framework allows Jorik to consume processed human material, possibly including his own father, while experiencing reverence rather than revulsion. His adaptation is so complete that he now volunteers for selection quota enforcement, helping arbitrators identify citizens suitable for processing in his residential sector. The social structures that emerge in communities practicing systematic cannibalism represent another layer of psychological adaptation. Traditional family bonds evolve to accommodate the reality that loved ones may become sustenance, while new forms of social organization develop around the shared participation in consumption and processing. Neighborhood nutrition circles provide community support for families whose members have been selected for processing. These groups combine elements of grief counseling with celebration of the processed individual's contribution to community survival. Members share enhanced rations, tell stories about their transformed loved ones, and reinforce the narrative frameworks that make continued participation psychologically tolerable. When Mrs. Vorth's husband was selected last month, our entire nutrition circle gathered to honor his transformation, explained Circle Coordinator Alina Brass during a community meeting. We shared the enhanced rations his sacrifice provided, told stories about his life and service, and celebrated his continued presence among us through biological communion. His selection wasn't a loss, it was a graduation to higher service. The children who grow up within these adapted social structures display the most complete psychological integration of the cannibalistic system. Unlike adults who remember alternative moral frameworks, these children have never known a world where consuming processed humans represents moral violation. Their psychological development occurs entirely within the normalized horror of the biological reclamation system. 11-year-old Sarah Kelach demonstrates typical childhood adaptation patterns during her routine psychological evaluation. When asked about her feelings regarding her uncle's processing, she responds with enthusiasm rather than grief. "Uncle Thorne is the best uncle ever," Sarah explains with genuine excitement. "Even after he got selected for transformation, he still takes care of our family by being in our food. Every time I eat my nutrition paste, I can feel him making me stronger. When I grow up, I want to get selected too, so I can take care of my family the same way." The psychological evaluation notes Sarah's complete normalization of cannibalistic consumption, her eager anticipation of eventual processing, and her internalization of the system's value structure. Her adaptation is so thorough that she experiences processing selection as aspiration rather than threat, transformation as reward rather than punishment. But not everyone adapts successfully. The lower hive sectors contain populations of individuals whose psychological makeup renders them incapable of accepting the biological reclamation system. These maladapted citizens represent potential sources of social instability and require specialized management approaches. Bardicus Neem, a former chemical plant supervisor, experienced complete psychological breakdown when he discovered the true nature of the nutrition distribution system. His inability to develop effective rationalization frameworks led to severe dissociative episodes, paranoid ideation, and eventually to open resistance that required arbitrator intervention. He started refusing all nutrition rations, reports counselor Vex during Neem's commitment hearing. Complete rejection of the consumption system, accompanied by delusional beliefs about mass murder and institutional cannibalism. His psychological deterioration progressed to the point where he was encouraging other citizens to resist the quota system and reject their nutritional allocations. Neem's case represents a category of psychological failure that the Administratum classifies as adaptive resistance syndrome. Citizens suffering from this condition cannot integrate the biological reclamation system into their cognitive frameworks and instead experience persistent trauma responses that compromise their functionality and threaten social stability. Treatment approaches for adaptive resistance syndrome focus on intensive psychological reconditioning, designed to override maladaptive cognitive patterns and install appropriate normalization frameworks. The therapy combines pharmaceutical intervention with behavioral modification techniques that gradually erode resistance while building acceptance of systemic reality. The key insight is that resistance represents a failure of imagination rather than moral superiority, explains Dr. Yellen during a training session for psychological treatment specialists. Patients suffering from ARS cannot envision alternatives to their current ethical frameworks. Our therapeutic goal is to expand their conceptual horizons, helping them understand that traditional morality is a luxury the Imperium cannot afford. The treatment process involves controlled exposure to processing facilities, guided consumption of clearly identified processed materials, and intensive philosophical education about imperial necessity. Patients learn to reframe their revulsion as primitive thinking unsuitable for 41st millennium survival requirements. Most treatment cases result in successful adaptation within 2 to 6 months. Patients develop functional rationalization systems that allow continued participation in the biological reclamation system without persistent psychological distress. A small percentage require permanent pharmaceutical management to maintain stability, while extreme cases necessitate processing to prevent social contamination. Bardicus Neem's treatment proved unsuccessful despite 18 months of intensive intervention. His persistent resistance to normalization frameworks, combined with his attempts to organize other citizens into resistance activities, ultimately resulted in his classification as irredeemably maladapted and subsequent selection for immediate processing. The irony of Neem's fate, his transformation into the very nutritional system he opposed, demonstrates the inexorable logic of the biological reclamation program. Even resistance serves imperial purpose by providing sustenance for more adaptable citizens. The most disturbing aspect of the psychological adaptation system reveals itself in the competitive frameworks that develop around processing selection. As communities normalize cannibalistic consumption, they begin to develop social hierarchies based on processing efficiency, nutritional contribution, and family sacrifice records. Citizens compete for selection opportunities that will provide their families with enhanced rations and improved social standing. Processing becomes a form of social mobility, transformation into nutrition paste representing the highest achievement available to lower hive populations. My family has contributed 3 members to biological reclamation over the past 5 years, boasts Sector Supervisor Kellyan during a community efficiency meeting. My grandfather, my youngest brother, and my daughter-in-law have all achieved transformation, providing sustained nutritional support for our extended family network. We're proud to maintain the highest per capita contribution rating in residential Block 7 Delta. The competitive dynamics create social pressure that makes processing selection desirable rather than feared. Families without recent contributions face social stigma and reduced community standing. Children learn to aspire toward eventual processing as a form of family honor and personal achievement. The grinding continues through the night, processing today's biological resources into tomorrow's sustenance. And throughout Hive Mortis, adapted populations participate eagerly in the consumption and processing cycles that define their existence, their psychological evolution complete, their humanity transformed into something that serves the greater horror of imperial survival. Dr. Yellen's final observation captures the ultimate success of the psychological adaptation system. After sufficient exposure and conditioning, subjects not only accept the biological reclamation system, they become incapable of imagining alternatives to it. The adapted population views cannibalistic consumption as natural law, processing selection as social achievement, and resistance to the system as mental illness requiring therapeutic correction. Adaptive ethical frameworks, biological communion, sacred transformation. The words evolve. The horror becomes normal. The normal becomes sacred. The summons arrives during your morning shift at Processing Station Alpha 7, delivered by a junior arbitrator whose young face bears the expression of someone still learning to disconnect emotional response from bureaucratic duty. The data slate he carries displays your citizen identification number, current residential assignment, and a series of codes that you've learned to recognize over the past months of working in the facility. Selection notice. Priority classification. Immediate. Report for processing assignment. 1400 hours. Administrative complex 7G. Your hands tremble slightly as you read the notification, though whether from fear or something approaching relief, you cannot say. The past weeks of sorting human remains, of processing your neighbors and consuming the results, have left you suspended in a psychological state that makes normal emotional responses difficult to access. It's standard procedure, the arbitrator explains with practiced neutrality. Your service record shows exemplary dedication to imperial duty, and your processing efficiency ratings are consistently above target metrics. This selection represents recognition of your value to the community, not punishment for any failure. The language is carefully crafted to maintain the illusion that selection represents honor rather than execution, achievement rather than termination. But you've read enough selection notices over the past months to understand the reality behind the euphemistic phrasing. You're going to become nutrition paste. The realization brings an unexpected sense of completion. Your work at the processing facility has given you intimate knowledge of the transformation process, detailed understanding of how human beings are converted into sustenance for their fellow citizens. You know what awaits you, and there's something almost comforting in that knowledge. No uncertainty, no false hope, just the clear mechanical precision of imperial efficiency. Your replacement has already been assigned to Processing Station Alpha 7, a young woman named Kellyanne whose brother was processed last month, whose family now receives enhanced rations as compensation for their loss. She'll sort human remains with the same careful attention you've provided, learning gradually to disconnect emotional response from material reality, until eventually she receives her own selection notice. The cycle continues with inexorable logic. The 4 hours between notification and processing appointment pass with strange clarity. You complete your shift with methodical attention to detail, sorting the morning's biological resources according to established protocols. The irony of processing other people while awaiting your own processing seems appropriate somehow, a final demonstration of the system's elegant efficiency. Marcus Vol'jin arrives during your final hour at the station, unconscious on a transport gurney, tagged for standard processing protocols. You remember his face from neighborhood gatherings, his worried conversations with other HAB workers about gambling debts and family obligations. Now he represents approximately 847 individual nutrition packages that will feed families throughout residential sectors 1518. You flag his gurney for Processing Station 3 and update the efficiency logs with the same attention you've always provided. Professional standards matter, even during your final shift, especially during your final shift. The walk to Administrative Complex 7G takes 12 minutes through corridors you've traveled daily for the past months. The route passes through residential sectors where families are receiving their afternoon nutrition allocations, consuming processed humans while discussing work assignments, school performance, and community activities. Mrs. Kelach waves from her HAB unit doorway, holding the enhanced rations that her brother's processing provides. Her daughter Sarah, now stronger and healthier thanks to Uncle Thorne's sacrifice, practices educational exercises that teach her about Imperial resource management systems. They don't know that you're walking to your own processing appointment. Your selection notice wasn't announced publicly. The Administratum has determined that such notifications can create unnecessary community distress. Your neighbors will learn about your reassignment to essential services through standard communication channels, and your family will begin receiving enhanced rations within 24 hours of your processing completion. The Administrative Complex reception area maintains the sterile efficiency typical of imperial bureaucracy. Citizens awaiting various procedures sit on metal benches, reviewing data slates or staring at propaganda displays that reinforce the necessity of biological reclamation systems. The atmosphere is calm, almost meditative, the quiet acceptance of people who understand their place in larger systems beyond their control. Your name appears on the processing schedule displayed on wall-mounted screens. Citizen 7751 Delta Kappa, Standard Processing Protocol, Station 7, estimated completion, 1547 hours. The precision is oddly comforting. No uncertainty about timing or methodology. Your transformation into nutrition paste will be completed by 1547 hours. Your remains packaged and distributed according to established efficiency protocols. The pre-processing medical evaluation takes place in a sterile examination chamber, equipped with scanning devices that map your physiological characteristics with comprehensive precision. Dr. Vorth conducts the assessment with the clinical detachment you've observed during your work shifts, treating your body as biological resource rather than human being. Excellent processing candidate, Dr. Vorth notes while reviewing scanner results. Optimal muscle mass distribution, minimal contamination markers, projected yield within standard parameters. Estimated output, 2,847 individual nutrition portions with quality rating of Standard Plus. The medical evaluation includes psychological assessment designed to ensure processing readiness and minimize trauma responses that might compromise material quality. The questions focus on your understanding of the transformation process, acceptance of imperial necessity, and commitment to serving the Emperor through ultimate sacrifice. Do you understand the nature of biological reclamation? Dr. Vorth asks while completing assessment forms. Yes, you respond with complete honesty. I understand that I'm going to be converted into food to feed other citizens. And do you accept this transformation as necessary for imperial survival? Yes, I've seen the mathematics, the quotas, the efficiency reports. I understand the system. Excellent. Your cooperation will ensure optimal processing results. The pharmaceutical preparation begins with neural suppressants designed to minimize consciousness during the transformation process. The injection sites are precisely calculated to maximize unconsciousness while maintaining physiological stability that ensures material quality. You feel the compounds taking effect gradually, your awareness becoming soft and distant while your body remains functional. The sensation is not unpleasant, more like sinking into warm water than experiencing medical intervention. The transport to Processing Station 7 occurs through corridors you've walked countless times during your work shifts, but now you see them from the perspective of biological resource rather than facility technician. The other citizens awaiting processing lie unconscious on their gurneys, peaceful expressions suggesting that the pharmaceutical intervention is effective in minimizing trauma. Technician Morrow operates Processing Station 7 with the same methodical attention you've observed during countless previous procedures. He reviews your processing documentation, confirms material quality assessments, and initiates transformation protocols with practiced efficiency. Standard Adult Processing, Morrow notes while updating facility logs. Projected completion within 30 minutes, quality rating Standard Plus, output suitable for immediate distribution. The processing equipment represents the finest achievements of Imperial engineering, designed to maximize nutritional extraction while maintaining efficiency standards that ensure continuous operation. The machinery hums with mechanical precision, each component calibrated for optimal performance in converting human beings into sustenance. Your consciousness fades gradually as the transformation begins, the pharmaceutical compounds ensuring that you experience minimal awareness of the physical process. Your final coherent thoughts focus not on fear or regret, but on the mathematical elegance of the system that will convert your 4 kilograms of biological material into nearly 3,000 individual meals. You think about the families who will consume your processed remains, the children whose growth and development will be nourished by your sacrifice, the workers whose productivity will be sustained by the calories extracted from your transformation. Your death will prevent multiple deaths from starvation. Your individual extinction will contribute to collective survival. The logic is inexorable. The mathematics are compelling. The system works. Your last memory is of the grinding sound that has marked every day of your 15 years in the processing sector. The mechanical rhythm that transforms human beings into nutrition paste, individual lives into collective sustenance, personal identity into anonymous calories that feed the endless hunger of imperial survival. Grind, grind, grind. The sound of your transformation into something useful. The processing completes with standard efficiency. Your 4 kilograms of biological material yield 2,847 individual nutrition packages, each one containing approximately 285 grams of processed protein paste with quality rating Standard Plus. The packages are sealed, labeled, and loaded onto distribution vehicles that will carry your remains throughout residential sectors 1218. Your family receives notification that you've been reassigned to essential infrastructure maintenance in classified facilities, and that communication will be restricted for security reasons. Your enhanced rations begin arriving the following day, along with priority medical access and improved housing allocations that represent compensation for your sacrifice. Your wife and children consume your processed remains with gratitude for the improved nutrition, unaware that their enhanced rations literally contain the man they mourn. They participate unknowingly in the communion that connects every meal to someone's death, every portion to someone's transformation. The cycle continues with mechanical precision. Your replacement at Processing Station Alpha 7 begins her duties, learning gradually to sort human remains with appropriate emotional detachment. The facility processes new biological resources according to established quotas. The grinding continues through the night, converting today's selections into tomorrow's sustenance. And somewhere in the vast distribution network of Hive Mortis, packages containing your processed remains are dispensed through HAB unit nutrient systems to families who will never know your name, never remember your face, never understand that their survival depends upon your transformation. You become anonymous nutrition, individual identity dissolved into collective sustenance, personal death converted into communal life. Processing Station 7. Citizen 7751 Delta Kappa. Yield 2,847 packages. Quality Standard Plus. The machinery operates with perfect efficiency. The human cost becomes data. The data becomes food. In the end, the biological reclamation system represents more than pragmatic resource management. It embodies the fundamental truth about humanity's place in the 41st millennium. When faced with extinction, when pressed against the absolute limits of survival, Human beings will embrace any horror, rationalize any atrocity, participate in any degradation that promises continued existence. The Imperium of Man didn't choose cannibalism because its leaders were monsters. It chose cannibalism because the mathematics of survival demanded it, and because human nature proved sufficiently adaptable to normalize the unthinkable. The system works not through coercion, but through willing participation. Not through force, but through acceptance. The most disturbing aspect of the biological reclamation program isn't its efficiency or its scale. It's the ease with which ordinary people learn to embrace it. Mrs. Kellech consuming her brother's processed remains while feeling grateful for enhanced nutrition. Young Sarah aspiring to eventual processing as a form of family honor. Technician Morrow operating grinding stations with professional pride while eating lunch made from yesterday's victims. These aren't aberrations. They're adaptations. They represent humanity's remarkable capacity for psychological flexibility when survival is at stake. Lord Governor Hectrix understands this truth with clinical precision. From his administrative chambers in the upper hive, he oversees a system that processes millions of citizens annually while maintaining social stability and productive efficiency. His morning briefings include casualty reports that read like agricultural statistics, human lives reduced to biomass yields and nutritional output metrics. The current processing rates maintain optimal population sustainability while meeting caloric requirements for continued productivity, reports Administrative Supervisor Kane during the daily efficiency review. Biological reclamation operations are exceeding quotas by 3%, with quality ratings consistently above standard parameters. Citizen adaptation indicators remain within acceptable ranges, with resistance incidents below 0.3% of processed population. The numbers represent triumph of imperial engineering and social organization. 200 billion human beings participating voluntarily in a system that could theoretically process every one of them, sustained by the knowledge that their consumption and eventual transformation serves the greater purpose of species survival. But Lord Governor Hectrix's perspective extends beyond mere efficiency metrics. He understands that the biological reclamation system serves psychological and spiritual purposes that transcend its practical utility. The program doesn't just feed bodies, it shapes souls, creating forms of human consciousness adapted to the realities of survival in an impossible universe. The Great Reclamation represents humanity's final evolution, Lord Governor Hectrix explains during his private discussions with senior administrators. We have transcended the primitive moral frameworks that limited our ancestors, embraced the utilitarian calculus that ensures our continuation. Every citizen who participates in consumption and processing demonstrates their commitment to species survival over individual squeamishness. The philosophical framework transforms cannibalism from atrocity into achievement, degradation into transcendence. The citizens of the Imperium haven't fallen from grace. They've risen above the luxury of traditional morality to embrace the harsh necessities of galactic survival. This perspective finds expression in the Imperial Creed modifications that have emerged in the lower hive sectors. Traditional prayers for the Emperor's protection now include gratitude for biological reclamation systems, requests for selection opportunities, and celebration of transformation as the highest form of service. Blessed is the Emperor who provides sustenance through sacrifice, intones Preacher Vorth during morning congregational services. Blessed are the processed, for they continue to serve. Blessed are the consumers, for they accept sacred communion. In consumption we find unity, in processing we find purpose, in transformation we find eternal service to the golden throne. The congregations respond with genuine fervor, their voices raised in celebration of a system that has redefined the relationship between life and death, individual and community, sacrifice and survival. The children especially demonstrate complete integration of these modified spiritual frameworks, their prayers including earnest requests for eventual selection and family processing opportunities. But the true horror of the biological reclamation system reveals itself not in its immediate operations, but in its implications for human evolution. Each generation born into normalized cannibalism represents further adaptation away from traditional human consciousness toward something new, something molded by the necessities of systematic consumption of their own species. Dr. Yellen's longitudinal studies track psychological changes across multiple generations of citizens raised within the biological reclamation system. Her data reveals consistent patterns of cognitive adaptation that suggest fundamental alterations in human emotional and moral development. Third-generation subjects demonstrate complete normalization of cannibalistic consumption with no measurable psychological distress responses, Dr. Yellen reports in her confidential analysis. These individuals process human consumption decisions with the same emotional affect as previous generations applied to livestock slaughter. The traditional taboos against consuming human flesh appear to be genetically or culturally inherited traits that can be eliminated through sustained environmental conditioning. The implications extend beyond individual psychology to collective human identity. The citizens of Hive Mortis represent a new subspecies of humanity, one adapted for survival in conditions that would psychologically destroy their ancestors. They consume processed humans not because they're forced to, but because they've evolved beyond the moral frameworks that would make such consumption traumatic. The success of this adaptation can be measured in resistance rates. Despite processing millions of citizens annually, the system encounters organized resistance in less than 0.3% of cases. The vast majority of the population participates willingly, even eagerly, in consumption and processing cycles that sustain their civilization. Young Sarah Kellach, now 12 years old and healthier than ever thanks to enhanced nutrition derived from her uncle's processing, represents the future of human consciousness in the 41st millennium. Her casual acceptance of cannibalistic consumption, her eager anticipation of eventual processing, her complete integration of systematic human sacrifice into her worldview. These aren't symptoms of psychological damage, but evidence of successful adaptation. Sarah and her generation will grow up to operate processing facilities, enforce quotas, design efficiency improvements, and raise their own children within normalized cannibalism. They'll expand the system's reach, optimize its operations, and perhaps develop new methodologies that current generations cannot imagine. The children represent humanity's victory over its own limitations. They've transcended the squeamishness that might have prevented species survival, evolved beyond the moral luxuries that could have led to extinction, adapted to embrace whatever horrors necessity demands. From the perspective of alien observers, the transformation of human consciousness through the biological reclamation system might appear as evidence of corruption or degradation. Eldar seers studying human civilization express revulsion at species that voluntarily practices systematic cannibalism. Tau philosophers classify the Imperium's consumption practices as evidence of fundamental moral failure. But these alien perspectives reflect the luxury of species that haven't faced the same survival pressures as humanity. The Eldar's moral superiority is built upon technological advantages that eliminate resource scarcity. The Tau's ethical frameworks assume conditions of abundance that humanity has never experienced. When survival is genuinely at stake, when the alternative to horrible choices is species extinction, moral frameworks become evolutionary pressures rather than abstract principles. The humans who couldn't adapt to biological reclamation died of starvation. The humans who could adapt survived to reproduce and pass their psychological flexibility to future generations. The Imperium's cannibalistic systems represent successful evolutionary response to impossible survival pressures. They demonstrate humanity's ultimate adaptability, the willingness to sacrifice any principle, abandon any tradition, embrace any horror that ensures continued existence. Standing in his administrative chambers, Lord Governor Hectrix reviews production reports that document the processing of 247,000 citizens during the past month. Each number represents someone's transformation from individual identity into collective sustenance, personal death into communal survival. The mathematics are elegant. The system is efficient. The results speak for themselves. 200 billion human beings fed daily through biological reclamation systems. 0 deaths from starvation. Consistent productivity levels maintained across all sectors. Social stability preserved through adaptive psychological frameworks that transform potential trauma into spiritual achievement. The system works. And perhaps more importantly, the people want it to work. As evening approaches across Hive Mortis, families gather around their dining tables to share the day's nutrition allocations. Children laugh while consuming processed neighbors. Parents tell stories while eating transformed friends. Communities celebrate processing selections that provide enhanced rations for extended family networks. The grinding continues through the night, converting today's biological resources into tomorrow's sustenance. The sound that once seemed horrifying has become comforting, a mechanical lullaby that promises continued survival for another day in the service of the Emperor. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no waste, only different stages of consumption. Today's consumer becomes tomorrow's meal, and in the Imperium of Man, we are all both predator and prey in the feast eternal. The most horrifying truth about the biological reclamation system isn't that it exists, it's that it represents humanity's greatest achievement. The successful adaptation of an entire species to embrace systematic cannibalism without psychological collapse demonstrates evolutionary triumph that alien civilizations cannot match. Humanity has transcended its own moral limitations to achieve something unprecedented. Willing participation in species-wide cannibalism, maintained across generations without social breakdown. It's a form of collective consciousness that sacrifices individual identity for communal survival, personal dignity for species continuation. And it works. The grinding continues. The system functions. Humanity endures. In the feast eternal, we find our truest nature. The willingness to consume anything, sacrifice anyone, embrace any horror that promises one more day of existence. The Emperor protects, the citizens provide, the machinery processes, forever, final silence. The grinding fades slowly, leaving only the mechanical hum of ventilation systems and the distant sound of families gathering for their evening meals.